Boulder County will go into a level 1 fire restriction. Obviously, weather could change, but we're not really seeing that other than we saw a few drops of rain today. But that's not enough to really change anything. So things are certainly turning quicker than I think most of us expected after our wet May. But expect to see those restrictions probably out next week. Thanks.
Thanks, Rick. That's really good to know. That's kind of reassuring. It has been so hot and dry this last week. Kind of feels unprecedented.
Quick question for Rick.
Sure.
Go ahead.
Because, every year we go through this, people don't remember what the numbers mean, what the levels mean. So what's the bottom line of no fires?
Well, level 1 is not no fires, it's fire restrictions.
Okay.
And I don't have the list in front of me. 1 and 2, it's easily confused, but basically with a 1, you can still have a fire in an established fire pit in a hosted campground or at your private residence. Fires, you wouldn't be able to have them in most cases outside of those established pits and outside of hosted campgrounds. But I like I said, I don't have that in front of me right now to quote you, but we will, as soon as that goes in, we'll have that up on our webpage and on Facebook, and we'll make sure it gets sent out with any meeting notes that go out that we can get them out to.
Okay, great. Rick, I'm always a little baffled by the fact that when there are fire bans, the supermarket is still selling firewood.
Well, we can't tell them they can't do that. We can ask them not to, and we have before. Because sometimes they just kind of forget that. Kind of in the same line as Ace still sells mulch, and some people put that right up against their house, which isn't necessarily a good idea. So we don't have the regulatory authority to stop them from doing that. We can just ask them to, maybe consider not selling it during those high fire danger times.
Well, some of it's a matter of education. I think, the tourists come up here, of course, they want to buy firewood and have a fire because that's what you do when you're camping. Doesn't matter if it's 90 degrees at 7 o'clock at night.
I agree. And they can still, under the level 1 restrictions that will probably go in next week, if they're going to a campground like Kelly Doll or Brainerd Lake or those other ones that have a host at them, they can have fires there. So, they can still buy it either on site or through some place like BNF.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
I would have a quick question just related to Rick. Do they have signs posted at some of the more popular kind of trailheads just saying the fire restrictions? Do you know?
Yeah, actually, both the county and the Forest Service do a really good job of getting those posted. It was a little unusual for Gilpin County to go ahead with the fire restrictions without the Forest Service doing it at the same time. That's been an effort over the last quite a few years to have all of the agencies go into restriction at the same time. That way there's consistent messaging. The county has signs that they have designated spots all over the county. They put them up as soon as the fire ban or restrictions go into effect. And then the Forest Service also has the same thing and puts their signs up at the same time. Sometimes it takes a day to do that, but they generally get them up pretty quick.
That's great. Thanks, Rick.
Sure, no problem.
Great. We've got a special guest tonight. We have Gary Wachner. It's going to break us down a little bit about the information of the rights of nature, which is a resolution going forward soon before the BOT, a resolution for Boulder Creek and its watershed. So welcome, Gary. Thanks for joining us tonight. We will see if you want to do some screen sharing. Let's see.
Gary, can you hear us? Are you there?
Otherwise, we'll skip on. Otherwise, we can come back.
No, I don't see. He had his camera on. I don't see it anymore.
Yeah, he did. Well, real quick, we'll just say.
I'll shoot him a text too.
Okay, sounds good. We can shoot through some of these real quick things too. Like the flyers that were distributed at town cleanup. They addressed the Big Springs egress and the Barker Shoreline Trails project. So if you have any comments or edits on those, I think Richter might be getting back with some additions when he returns in a couple of weeks. Do send me any edits you have on that, and we'll continue to do media and outreach on both of those.
And just, I guess, to piggyback up with that, we did end up with a few leftovers. So those are at town hall. So if anyone ever had an event or you were going to, or some desire to distribute them, feel free to swing by town hall. And obviously we can print more as well.
Great, thanks, Miranda. That's awesome.
So Gary's saying he can hear us.
Okay.
Gary, we can't hear you though, if you are talking.
All right, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, there we go.
Okay, great. Yeah.
Yeah.
Are we ready to go?
Yeah, please
Yeah.
do. We're looking forward to hearing from.
Okay, I'm gonna share my screen for everybody. I'll just run you through a few slides here and talk about rights of nature for rivers. So I'm Gary Wachner. I'm the director of the Save the Colorado River campaign. Our organization is based in Fort Collins, but I'm a part-time resident in Nederland on Hummer Drive, which is off Cold Springs Road. And I'm here right now, and with a little bit of intermittent internet connections. I'll try to breeze through this while things are working. My organization is leading the fight against the Gross Dam expansion, just so that you know who I am and what we're doing. This has nothing to do with that, but I just wanted to let you know that. And 2 weeks ago, we also presented to the Sustainability Advisory Board, and they unanimously endorsed this resolution. So I'll just take you through the slides right now. I'm doing this in conjunction with the Earth Law Center. They're based in Boulder, but it's an international organization. A fellow runs it named Grant Wilson. And some of you may know Grant. He's been in NET a few times speaking on this issue. So when we talk about rights of nature and new environmental laws, one of the first questions that comes up, well, what's wrong with our old environmental laws? All of our federal laws are 50 years old or older. The Endangered Species Act, Clean Water Act, National Environmental Policy Act. They can be effective in some situations. Most of the time, though, they just kind of regulate the amount of environmental damage. They don't often actually stop or protect things. So they were good for their time. They are kind of weak, and so it's kind of a moment in history where people are looking at creating some new environmental laws. At the state, there's also a Clean Water Act. It can be, however, poorly enforced and rife with political manipulations. At the local level, Boulder County has 1041 regulations, which actually are very strong if they use them and if they are enforced. Of course, that's what we're involved with the Gross Dam expansion. And towns, and like Nederland, of course, have numerous local land use regulations. So what is rights of nature? It's also sometimes called earth law or ecocentric law. It's an emerging body of law for protecting, restoring, and stabilizing the functional interdependency of Earth's life and life support systems. A governance structure that uses rights of nature would also support the entire biological community and not just the human community. And this way we sometimes call it ecocentric rather than anthropocentric. Rights of nature tries to correct flaws within the legal system. It tries to give nature fundamental rights to exist, thrive, and be free from pollution. One of the main goals of rights of nature is to restore nature to health. It also, however, generally supports human rights, indigenous rights, and other kinds of rights. It gives nature a voice in decision-making. Sometimes rights of nature ordinances or resolutions create guardianship bodies, so it actually points people to be a guardian for a watershed. It can also give political representation, and it gives nature the opportunity to be considered in decision-making. It's a global movement. There are quite a few countries who've engaged around this issue now, either with constitutional amendments, court decisions, local ordinances, or indigenous law. Ecuador has rights of nature written into its constitution. Bangladesh has now protected all of its rivers in the country under rights of nature. India has one or two of its rivers. Uganda just passed the rights of nature movement in part of its country. And New Zealand, down there at the bottom right, was one of the first to give rights of nature, or what's called personage status, to a river. Talk about that a little bit more. The Wanganui River was the first river on the planet to receive rights of nature, and it is now recognized as a legal person by the New Zealand government. That was back in 2015, I believe. And this is me. I was on the Wanganui River canoeing back in 2017 and wrote a nice story about that, and spent a little time with Maori tribes people who now are the guardians of the Wanganui River there in New Zealand. In the United States, the movement is also starting to take hold. The Nez Perce tribe recently gave rights of nature to the Snake River in their watershed. And they appointed a legal guardianship body, and it's a part of their longstanding tribal belief system. The Yurok tribe on the Klamath River in Northern California and Southern Oregon also recently recognized rights of nature for the Klamath River in their reservation area, giving the river rights to exist, flourish, and naturally evolve, among other rights. In the United States, interestingly, the Democratic National Committee last year actually created a platform which recognized rights of nature. President Biden did not adopt this particular piece of the platform, but it was the first time that it got recognized rights of nature at a high level like that by one of the major political parties. And they encouraged the president to incorporate rights of nature and principles into U.S. law, similar to President Clinton's Council on Sustainable Development, which was back in the 1990s. At the local and regional level in the United States, Santa Monica recently passed an ordinance which gives allows the ecosystem to possess sustainability rights. In Lake Erie, there was a Bill of Rights ordinance passed 2 years ago. Two rivers in Florida, just fascinating, in the last November election, the Ukiva and Ikanlakhachi rivers, put it to a vote by the people of Orlando, Florida, and it got 92% of the vote to give those rivers rights of nature. And rivers across Colorado are coming soon. We're having numerous conversations to jumpstart this concept. So what does rights of rivers and watersheds mean? It means that a watershed and a river would have a right to flow, a right to perform essential functions within its ecosystem, right to be free from pollution, right to feed and be fed by sustainable aquifers and glaciers, a right to native biodiversity, and a right to regeneration and restoration. We're currently in conversations with about 10 communities in Colorado and Utah about establishing local rights of nature ordinances or resolutions like this one here in Nederland. It's an exciting time in the rights of nature movement. So the particular resolution that we drafted for Nederland and was also supported by the Sustainability Advisory Board, I'll just hit a few highlights of it. It's a non-binding resolution, so it's not an ordinance, and we're very open to any wording changes you might have. It doesn't actually create a new law or change any law. It avoids contentious litigation. And that's important because sometimes rights of nature ordinances actually get litigated very quickly and they get very complex. So we're going a little bit different approach. It doesn't impact any of Nederland's current water rights. What it does do is create an opportunity for a friendly, community-wide conversation about giving nature a voice in decision-making. It allows the town board or the town trustees to create guardians who are appointed to speak for nature. And it would set Nederland on track as a world leader in the rights of nature movement. Right now, there's only one community in the state of Colorado that has rights of nature down in the San Luis Valley. And it's a rights of nature for the whole town. It's not a watershed. So this would actually be the first resolution in the state of Colorado that would be passed. It's my last slide. There's lots of information on our website, savethecolorado.org/rights of nature. There's also an interview there, among other things. There's several videos, a lot of newspaper articles, some drafts of ordinances. There's an interview there where I'm interviewing with two of the founders and leaders in the American Rights of Nature movement. On my right is Corinna Gore, who works at Columbia University on rights of nature. And on my left is Linda Sheehan, who was one of the founders of the Earth Loss Center. So that's the end of my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Gary, this is Atash, and I have some questions for you.
Okay.
Okay, so contentious litigation. How do you avoid contentious litigation?
Yeah, so if you create an ordinance that says your watershed has rights of nature, that's an actual local law, it's possible and likely that the state would step in and say, you can't do that. Only the state can create laws around water in the state of Colorado. It's possible that that would happen. It's also possible that, someone could sue if you created an ordinance and try to stop something from happening. Because this is a resolution and not an ordinance, it doesn't create any law, and so there's no way. It's just a statement of opinion about the trustee and the town board if they were to pass it, and so it doesn't force or require anything to happen that someone could litigate.
Okay, so in terms of pollution, with the right to be pollution-free, wouldn't that involve some type of litigation? Like around here, there doesn't happen so much anymore, but there are leaks from old mines, things like that, with fish die-offs, and the water becomes polluted. Then what? How does this interact?
Yeah, so this is the beginning of a process, and that's why it's a resolution and not an ordinance. As a resolution, it basically just starts a conversation. It allows people to speak on behalf of nature, but there's nothing that anyone can actually do or enforce with a resolution rather than an ordinance. And so if you notice at the very end of the resolution, if you had a chance to read it, it does recommend that the town communicate to the state and try to encourage the state to actually allow local rights of nature ordinances to exist. This is actually going on in Florida right now. As I just mentioned, the people in Orlando, Florida voted for these two rivers to have rights of nature. And then now a whole nother movement is moving forward with a ballot initiative at the state level in Florida to try to allow local rights of nature ordinances to exist. So it's sort of a long process, and this is kind of the beginning of a process where it could be that in the future, if there was an actual ordinance and if there was some kind of acid mine drainage that drained out one of the mines and came through the town and turned the creek orange or something like that, and if the state actually allowed local ordinances and laws to protect water and watershed, then someone could actually litigate at that point. But that might not occur for 5 or 10 years in the future, or who knows.
So it's bringing awareness to the public that this is a living entity. This entity has life and it has spirit, and we need to acknowledge that and treat it like it's human. I mean,
yeah, that's a great way of putting it. And it would allow people, if the town board did this and recognized it, it would allow people to come forward to the town board during public comment or during any issue and say, I'm here to speak on behalf of the Boulder Creek watershed. It is a living entity. It does have a spirit. And here's my opinion of what I think it would say about this proposed project or this proposed or this pollution situation or something like that.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Gary. Do we have any other questions for Gary?
Hi, Gary. Just want to
Hi.
say, really appreciate the work that you do. Appreciate you for being here. I've been following work at Save the Colorado for quite some time, and it's really inspiring stuff that I think we should all aspire to. At the same time, it does kind of sadden me to some extent that we have to frame this in the kind of neoliberal frame of individual rights and the notion of personhood under kind of the law, which I think is a kind of problematic way to frame nature, as I'm not sure that it actually directly applies to the way that an individual person should be treated. But I see how this kind of lawmaking and this kind of legislation can be very effective and can, frame the rights of nature in the same way that you might frame, let's say, the rights of a corporation, which is ascribed personhood, yet, a river is not. And so I see the value of it. It does sadden me that we have to speak in these terms about something that I think is much more complex and nuanced than the way that we're framing it. Just wanted to, make that very clear, but that also I'm very likely to vote yes on this as a trustee and try to get this passed in the town of Nederland. As much as I am hesitant about this kind of language and the way that it kind of frames everything under the terms of the human, rather than maybe accepting that not everything is human and we need to recognize that there's something different out there that we should respect. But I understand how it can be effective.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and that would be a wonderful story for someone to come forward to the town board and articulate too. And every place where rights of nature has passed, the language is somewhat different. And when I brought up personhood status, which is what they actually did on the Wanganui River in New Zealand, they said that the river is a person. And so it gave it legal standing in federal law there in New Zealand. The things that the ordinances and resolutions that the Native Americans are passing, for example, the Yurok and the Nez Perce, they don't word it as a personhood. They word it, differently so that it reflects their, local understanding of law and human relationships with the non-human world. And so, the wording obviously can be changed, and we don't actually use the word personhood in this resolution. I was just using it because it is something that sometimes people heard. And of course, you mentioned one of the things that people talking about a lot is like, well, if a corporation could be a person, why can't a tree be a person, or a river be a person in the law? And that's the way that it's very often framed, because it helps, just kind of helps to touch people's brains. Like, oh, I guess I see your point. How can a corporation be a person and a river can't be a person? And so that's the way that the conversation can move forward. But I think that Nederland is a very inspiring place, and you all might want to think about it very differently.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and I appreciate that it's not that your proposal is not necessarily saying that the river is a person and framing it that way, but that conversation around rights often gets kind of conflated with this notion of individuality, which I think is something that is peculiar to Western civilization and our conception of economics and the way of organizing a society. So I think that there's a really interesting, nuanced conversation to be had here, and thank you for bringing this forward.
I'm glad Eric, addressed that, because yes, most people can relate to the absurdity of a corporation being human. However, on another level, a living entity with a living spirit is more in alignment with what nature is. However, I suppose a lot of people, unless they're indigenous, can't really relate to that. It's just a thing. So that's just what I'm putting out in terms of the wording.
Yeah, thank you, Gary. Thank you for coming tonight too. Like, we really appreciate your time and all the energy and effort that you put into these programs. Thank you so much.
Jesse, can I ask?
Yeah.
Sorry, if are we in a position as ProSab to maybe record a vote on whether or not we recommend adopting
exactly.
something?
I was just about to go ahead and ask everyone individually whether they're in favor of endorsing Resolution 2021, and then we can go ahead and pass that on. So if that sounds good with you, if there's any other further questions, I will just I will go around the board and you will give me an aye or no. Any further questions for Gary?
Is the actual resolution available for us to read?
Yeah, Miranda emailed it a little earlier this week.
But I mean, can we pull it up? I'm just looking for it. And
oh, right.
Yeah, sorry, give me a second. And
I will put up. Sorry, I forget what device I'm on. I'm on a phone. Okay, hold on 1 second.
Yeah, I'm happy to answer any questions about the wording of the resolution that you might have.
Great. Yeah, Miranda, you emailed it a little earlier.
Yeah,
today.
I'm so sorry. I can thank you, Gary, for drawing attention to that. But you did just get it, not even like an hour and a half ago. So I'm happy to have it pulled up here and can kind of scroll through it when everyone's ready.
Great, I can see it. Can you see it, John, or would you like someone to read it?
yeah, no, we're good. I can see it.
Okay. Otherwise, we're happy to read it too.
We can keep going down there. I guess you can keep scrolling if it's just me. Yep, keep going down. Yeah, keep going. There we go. Okay, section 1. Okay. All right.
Hey, just a quick question on Article 5 there. Who is it that's producing this report every 12 months?
I did have the same question too.
I thought that myself.
Can you repeat the question? I'm sorry.
I'm just looking at Article 5 in the resolution that says at least once every 12 months, prepare a concise written report for the community on the health and state of the creek. I was asking, who is it that's preparing that report?
I think the direction is given to the town board to do that. And so,
Which of course means town staff would be assigned with doing that job.
Yeah. It doesn't necessarily feel like work for work's sake, but it also feels like something we'd be asking an already overworked town staff or volunteer board of trustees to do that might not yield a lot of benefit. I guess the next question is the board of trustees has already signed and approved this resolution. Is that correct?
No.
No? Okay.
So they actually didn't get to it in, let's see, the June 1st. And then the board felt it was appropriate for ProSab to review. So it actually will go before the board on July 6th instead.
It does seem like maybe an outside agency or an expert would be the one kind of qualified to analyze the health and state of the creek and watershed.
Well, and my thing is like, if it's the Boulder watershed, we're looking at a county level. And I think we as a town want to support this, but we're just a little tiny speck on the Boulder watershed. And so, maybe we support, but I don't know what the county feel is like. And maybe we could find out from Gary, is this also the county's looking at this, or is this, am I thinking too big? But it seems like we would want the county to be the person or entity that's looking at the whole watershed report.
Mm-hmm.
and I apologize a little. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, I apologize. A little more clarification would be useful. The town of Nederland, as you know, can only pass a resolution or an ordinance that applies to the annexed boundary or the growth management area of Nederland. And so we were only thinking that particular, all of this entire resolution, but number 5 also would only apply to the town boundary of Nederland. And so it doesn't apply to the county or the city. It doesn't apply to Barker Reservoir because Barker Reservoir is owned by the city, and the annexed boundary of Nederland is driven around Barker Reservoir, for example. And so we could definitely, when it got to the town board, we could definitely think about just adding in a few words at some point, making it clear that this is just about the creek and the watershed in the Nederland boundary.
Okay, that helps. Thank you for the clarification.
Gary has the sustainability advisory board. Taking a look at.
Yes, they looked at it 2 weeks ago at their meeting, and they didn't offer any wording changes, and they unanimously endorsed it and requested that it move forward to the town board.
Okay.
I get just responding real quick to the 2 previous commenters about number 5. It does say concise, so you could think of it as short rather than long. Of course, you can write very, very long things about watershed health, and so we were trying to make it reasonable and concise. But I don't have an answer to would the staff do that, or would an outside consultant do that? Ideally, you wouldn't have to hire someone to do it. But it'd be sort of a living document too. I would think that every year you might take a look at and think about if it needs any updating.
Could be a project for a CU student, even grad student.
Like, it would be interesting just to know what kind of things you'd be analyzing, whether, you're taking analyzing the water levels, measuring the flow rates in various creeks and that kind of thing.
I think that this is not overly prescriptive in terms of what it demands and the way that this report needs to be structured and the level of detail or depth that it has to go to. But I think that just the idea of even doing a cursory report done by town staff would be a good practice and would not be overly burdensome on an annual basis.
Yeah, even just the idea of it would promote looking after the waterways in town. So
it basically just keeps us thinking about it.
Yeah. Do you need to scroll down any more, John? Are you good?
Yeah, no, I'm fine, thanks.
Great. Are there any further questions for Gary or Miranda or any of us? If not, I will put the question before you. Are you in favour of endorsing Resolution 2021-11? And I'll just go down alphabetical order. Atashna,
Yes.
Brian,
Yes.
Chris,
Yes.
Eric,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
myself, yes. Great. There you go, Gary. Unanimous support from ProSub.
Thank you all. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
It's going
thanks,
to be
Gary.
exciting. You're going to be a
Yes.
world leader.
Thank you for doing that, putting that together. Much appreciated.
Okay. All right. Have a good evening.
Thanks,
Yeah,
Gary.
keep us posted.
Okay.
Thank you, Gary.
Thank you. Right, we'll keep hustling through the rest of this stuff. Some of this stuff doesn't have to be very long. We've got Take a Hike and the volunteers. Any suggestions? We're soliciting still for Maya McKama's volunteer crew from the Boulder Watershed Collective, talking about watersheds still. They have suggested revegetating the creek. I know we don't have anyone from, doesn't look like we have Nikki here today either. So anything like that, I would perhaps suggest we either consider ourselves or suggesting volunteers to do a glass pickup sometime from the former sludge pond, the wastewater treatment plant. Over on the day after cleanup day, I filled I filled up over half a gallon bag full of broken glass just from this small zone down there. So I would like us to kind of consider doing that. So please do, let me know what you think about that. Any thoughts for sending over to Maya for volunteer work?
I think glass pickup sounds like a great plan. Anything noxious weed oriented as well, I think is valuable and it's difficult for Public Works to manage.
Yeah.
I think that revegetating the creek would need to be a larger conversation with Public Works and involve maybe a few more people who are maybe like Rhea Ortner would be a good person to talk to about things like that as well. I don't think we should be sending that over to them as an opportunity until we've determined what exactly that would look like and if we even want that done.
Great. Well, I'd be happy to suggest some glass pickup because it is much needed for this summer too. So if you're ever down in the area, go fill up a bag of glass.
Yeah, and if Boulder watershed folks want to do noxious weed pulls, that would be great too.
Yeah, and let's plant a seed for sometime in the summer too for us to start participating in some more weed pulls too. That'd be great. Sorry, Miranda.
Do you know how many people participated in Wild Bears event, volunteer-wise?
I don't off the top of my head, but yeah, I could find that out for you.
I guess the only reason for my statement is maybe if we picked kind of a date and time to do that, we play off of what just happened, the 2 events that just happened, and try to pull some of those volunteers. I do know there's a noxious weed pull in the making, and I will get you that date right now.
Yeah, I was just thinking that Stephanie just sent me that information this week too, and I am not sure.
Yeah, so it looks like they're...
I think as much as we can get community involvement from all ages, especially the children and the teens, they're the future, and educating them with hands-on activities like this would behoove us, it would behoove the planet, the town, whoever, and plant a seed for the future with these kids.
So Saturday, yes, I agree. Saturday, July 10th is the weed pull.
Okay. Okay, so we'll send all that information out to the board and make sure you all have that, because it would be great to have some ProSab representation there.
We actually have a Facebook event going for it, so I will send a link to this. So maybe, my thought might be then, or maybe my recommendation to consider, if we do once or twice a month, if we could maybe squeeze something else in July, or potentially, I hate to push off the glass, but, do something in August and keep that momentum rolling. Because so for those of you, between town staff and volunteers at the town cleanup, we had almost 30 people Now, given that 12 of those are staff, but it's a pretty significant group who, you know, the hope is that they're eager to keep going.
Yeah, we could see a lot of results with that kind of teamwork. Great. Well, yeah, we'll keep forwarding this out to you. You can expect to see some emails about that. Any other questions on that item? Keep looking for suggestions for the Take a Hike crew too. Think about that on your hikes around the area this summer. We're kind of looking for a trail that crosses various stages of mitigation and various stages of kind of forestry and ecological health. So yeah, do keep sending any ideas you have for that, for the Take a Hike program, people. Brian and Eric, do you have any updates on the Trails Master Plan? I know we are getting some results in. Some people have said they've filled it out already.
Yeah, I meant to ping Miranda about this earlier this week, but I didn't get a chance. I don't know how many people have filled it in, so I'm not sure if we've got very many results or what those results look like just yet.
Yeah, I won't be able to fully analyze them, but let me at least get that information so we can.
And if it's hard to do in real time, we can just follow up on this offline if you want.
I should be able to get it really quick, but.
And I need to.
Master plan survey. Okay,
Yeah.
so you have received 24 responses, and it's been viewed 313 times. So we're missing a little view to completion, but I will export this and send it to you so you at least have the 24 so far. Yeah, conversion rate is 7% from the number of people who view. So thoughts on pushing this out more, and we obviously can keep promoting it.
Yeah, that's great. I've only seen one promotion from the Town of Ned Facebook page to like Ned heads. So maybe a second wave of promotions. I'd say even if we only get 10 to 15 more surveys, that's probably enough to get us started with kind of the next phase of the overall master plan kind of planning.
Do you and Eric maybe have a thought of what that social media post could be? I mean, I'm happy to do the same one again, or if you wanted to be creative and develop some new language.
I'll circle up with you and or both of you offline, and maybe we can just craft something that's a little bit different than the first one, and just to see if we can have a slightly different pitch this time around.
I can send you some nice, like put some nice trails pictures too. That always helps improve.
All right, lay it on us, Jesse. That sounds good.
Just photos.
Just like trail porn.
Yeah.
That sounds good.
Exactly.
Brian, do you just want me to send this information just straight to you, or should I send it to you and Eric? Who do you want to receive this data here?
Yeah, I'm gonna clog Eric's email account as well, so send it to both of us.
Okay, deal. Me too. Everyone is.
I will say 24 seems pretty decent for Nederland so far. So
that was my first reaction too.
Yeah.
I feel like, with Envision, and you all saw how hard we pushed Envision, and I mean, we only got 96, and so I do agree that 24, while I know there's a desire to have way more engagement, it is a great step in the right direction versus
that's better than
one or two.
That's better than the 2015 Trails Master Plan survey that went out.
There we go.
Already crushed that one, so.
Yeah, killing it. We should just stop now.
Right? No more. How many was that back then?
I think I got 11.
Ah, you doubled.
And that included some ProSap members, I think. So.
Oh, okay.
Great. All right, awesome. Anyway, thanks for the update. I think that's good progress. I think that maybe just getting a smattering more responses is not bad. And then I think that will help seed kind of our thinking for the next round, which, if you don't recall, included some kind of special interest focus groups with some Nederland area organizations to say like, hey, here's what the public thinks. What do you think? And then ultimately, possibly some public forums that can all contribute to a larger plan that we still need to work on, hopefully toward the end of the summer.
Keep, Brian, just a suggestion, Mountain Midlife Group, which is an offshoot of Nederland area seniors. Nicole has started being active again, putting out a e-newsletter. So you might contact her because they have they have quite a list of people who are over 50 who are actively engaged in the community. So that would be a demographic that's usually underrepresented that you might look into.
Great idea, Tasha. There's a bunch of other newsletters in town that go out to the various community groups too. So let's try and hit them all up. Hit the library and Wild Bear and
yeah, and for many of these, certainly with the one you just mentioned, Natasha, I'm not tapped into that. So if you can track down my email address and send me a contact name, that'd be fantastic, and I can take it from there.
Jesse, we should send it out
I
to
will
the
do that.
MFP list as well.
yeah, send that out to MFP. Let's send it out to teens. Just a little link directly to the survey. That's really
Right.
good idea.
Yeah.
As
Thank
few
you.
clicks as possible to get to the actual survey itself.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, get all these people who are not on Facebook all the time. Great. Moving on. Any other thoughts about that? Great. Yeah, we've still got tons to crush through here. So we have number 5, pocket parks. We have resident requests to look at some of the usage of pocket parks, particularly the ones in Old Town, and discussion of potential dog parks. I think just a few of the different stages that are going to be involved in that is finding out exactly the location of the pocket parks. I know we have a couple listed on our trails map. And I was checking out the zoning map earlier, and there, I don't think town property doesn't appear to be located or designated on the zoning map. And have that kind of marked on the town property, and including any walkways and access paths. I know some of you have got like some history and knowledge about backgrounds of the pocket parks and various historical things that have happened with that too. So
Jesse, if I can chime in on this,
please do. Thanks.
Quite a few years ago when I first became active with ProSab, there wasn't really, the only knowledge about these pocket parks was just vague knowledge from Public Works, mainly from Nikki.
Yeah, and they're
What
they're non-maintained, and there's no indication
No,
that
but what
Yeah.
I did was I found the locations because I'm interested in local history of people and place. I actually drove around to every conceivable spot they may be. I mapped the locations. I even researched the names of a lot of the parks with the county, and I put that information in a list and I gave it to Public Works.
I'm going to just ask real quick if Miranda, if you're there, do you think you'd be able to, like, if the trails map is on the ProSab webpage, would you think you'd be able to pull that up just while we're talking about this?
Yeah, and I know last year we had done kind of the side-by-side comparison over Atashna's list to one town had created, and if I recall it correctly, Atashna, we felt that they were merged together appropriately, because we did that comparison last year. But yes, let me go ahead and pull this up.
Yeah, we had kind of the alphabetized list of all the pocket parks and kind of what their amenities were and whether they were maintained or not.
Yes. Yes. There were some comments made back at that time from some staff people that regarding the pocket parks that were in the neighborhoods, people wanted to keep them quiet. They didn't want the information to be public knowledge and on along that line. My feeling is that there's so many newcomers to town that I would venture to say that most of the people who live in the neighborhoods where these pockets are not even aware of them, their existence, or let alone use them for the most part. And my general feeling is these are little secret parks for the residents. They're not a private entity. And I believe that they should be accessible and used by the public.
Do you think you could link to the map, Miranda, the trails, the map that's on the ProSap page? Sorry, thank you.
Give me one. I wasn't sure exactly if you wanted the list or the map.
Well, that was
and,
really,
and
that was
to
really
your
helpful to
point
look at.
about the zoning map. So the zoning map is
that's
being updated, and it is reflective of open space. That's being, and I can pull that up in another screen here. But
that's it. Yeah.
This is it. Yeah. So in our zoning map, like Tilden and Angel, what may have not been marked as town property before. I don't know if you can see if I share screen. Nope, you can't. I'll stop. I'll go back to my PDF here in a moment and show you that the updated zoning map that we're working on does highlight all of these green areas. They're blue on the zoning map, but everything is now transferring over. Now, like you're saying, pathways, that kind of stuff, there's just no room for that on a zoning map, but at least it's zoned appropriately to show you where town open space and parks exist.
I have to say, I entirely agree with Atashna, and I think this ties into some of the feedback that I'm already seeing on the trail survey, which is I think a minority at the moment. But it disturbs me to see white male age 25 to 34 saying that increased accessibility for people with decreased mobility is the lowest priority for our trails in the Netherlands. Like, that's an extremely disturbing sort of way of articulating your level of selfishness and lack of consideration for others.
Yes.
And so I think that that we really do need to decide that ProSab as a board should maybe come to some conclusions about the way that we're going to treat these assets that are owned by the town, the way that they should be used, how they should be signed, and who they're for. And I think that's something that we haven't really been able to discuss, and I think it's almost impossible to discuss over WebEx, over Zoom. It's really challenging to have a meaningful conversation that is nuanced like this. But it's something that I find very frustrating, is that there are many, even residents of the town, especially folks who have been around for a while, who seem to think that people using the trail is somehow some kind of imposition on their lifestyle, which I think is absolutely absurd and is not actually acceptable. Right? Like, people who own property should not be going onto town land and chasing people off of it. And that is what is happening in a lot of neighborhoods. And unless we kind of decide as a town how we're going to treat our town assets, we need to make a serious consideration about that and have a community-wide conversation about that, because it has been disturbing me for quite some time.
Yes, it's gotten worse over the years, and it's never been addressed. People consider in the neighborhoods, especially like around Old Town, people consider these secret pocket parks as their personal place that no one else should use.
I know of one of these pocket parks that a resident actually uses as a parking lot because it's a 4 or 5 bedroom house, and each bedroom is occupied by an individual tenant, and they all have different cars, and they all park it on the pocket park itself, which has been torn up from all their car tires, right? Like, this is an unacceptable use of town property, and I do think that we need to be more clear about how we expect these things to be used.
Well, it's really a matter of ignorance over decades. So now, in a sense, what we're doing is we're trying to identify it, label it and regulate it, make it accessible to everybody. And there's going to be a lot of disgruntled people, but so what? These are like people's parks.
Eric, do you mind if I just ask you, is it listed on the map here, like the one that you're referring to? I mean, are they all? My question is just, are they all noted?
No, they're not, because I only learned about this actually because I made a bid on that house and had to go through all that entire process. So that's the only way that I learned that was actually town property that was being improperly used, and it's actually significant. Like, it has a grove of trees, it could potentially have a bench, there's a trail that runs right by it. Like, it's something that could be a nice little spot in town, and instead it's
that's my understanding from looking at a few that it's just missing a few town-owned access areas and walkways from this kind of least from the trails map, that would be really useful in the trails survey and the master plan of how we think about access to parks in the future.
One of my underlying concerns regarding this, it's a little more broad, but it seems like everything we discuss, want to do, or in the process of doing, we're putting a lot on public works shoulders. And I think we need to be more, we need to be more aware of that and not somehow find some other options so that we're not burdening public works who are understaffed anyhow, as the town has been growing rapidly, because it puts us in an awkward position, which I think was exemplified, basically everything sort of came out in the wash regarding the landscaping for the Barker Meadows. I think that is the prime example that brings this all to light for me.
Well, and a lot of this goes back to kind of historical documentation issues that are an ongoing issue for the town. The documentation gets lost, and then we have to rehash the same thing over and over.
Yes,
that's true. But there are also larger things that we can put pressure on, and I think that if our advisory boards are aware of it, and we can pressure the Board of Trustees also to do something about it. I'm thinking, for instance, of the 0.1% sales tax that is Boulder County-wide that Nederland advocated for as part of the Boulder County Consortium of Cities. And that sales tax, not one penny of it went to improvements in Nederland. Not one penny of it, right? And so we're not getting our fair share. And they started that kind of trails restoration program that you can apply for every year, which is funded by that very sales tax, but does not count for trails that are within town boundaries. And yet people in the town of Nederland are paying that sales tax. It doesn't make any sense, right? And they are putting trails in other towns that actually do go into the town boundaries of other municipalities. And not part of that program, right? Those are separate, larger projects that they're doing. So that's how they make the distinction. So fundamentally, I think that we need to be a little bit more clear on what it is that we need. And then when we are in a position to advocate for that, we need to be able to put that on the table in front of the county commissioners and say, this is what Nederland needs. These are the funds that we need. And without us even knowing ourselves what it is that we're trying to accomplish, it's going to be really difficult to advocate at higher levels for the funding that we need to do it. So I think that's part of what we really need to be doing here with this Trails Master Plan, is articulating what it is that we need and what that looks like from a financial and resource perspective.
Yes. Then it goes back to us, these little mountain towns, i.e. mostly Nederland, being, the stepchild of the whole system, and no one is advocating for us. We need to advocate for ourselves, and we need to strongly advocate for ourselves and keep doing it and not drop the ball.
Indeed. And we have a fairly new board of county commissioners. And I know at least one of the three, that's Martaloa Chapman in particular, is very receptive to the idea that the Western County has been neglected, that the mountain towns have been neglected, that there are issues of digital divide, there are issues of accessibility, and that there are issues of funding that just have not been met in the same way that they have down below. And so not really a prime moment, but if we can't pull our own shit together so that we can approach them with some sense of what it is that we actually want from them and what we need, we're never going to get any resources. And not just going to give us a pot of money to play around with. We need to have a specific plan articulated.
Yes.
So I know we have Pam, if you're on the call and if you're available to talk, would you like to give any input about your ideas or your thoughts and what you would choose to advocate for as a resident?
Hi, yeah, I'm right here. I just have noticed that there are some what I thought were town properties that individuals had just privately taken over as their own personal parking or as their own personal play yards or whatever, and they look like they belong to those private citizens, And yet I hear so many people saying, well, why don't we have this and why don't we have that? Oh, we don't have the land. And then I see that there are these little pockets of land here and there that perhaps we could have a little playground or a dog park or something, and that we already own the land, but it's been consumed by adjacent private properties. And so it has essentially been taken from a public use area to private use only. And I just think that's a little unfair for the citizens when I hear people saying, well, why don't we have a little park or a dog park or whatever it is? And then I hear the responses, well, we don't have the land. And I think we do have little pockets of land here or there that are just not being managed. And so not as a criticism, just wondering, well, is there an opportunity that isn't being expanded upon, and how could I help facilitate some changes? If that's what the people want. I mean, if everybody's happy with the way things are, then we stay the course. But if people are asking for change and change is possible, how can I help?
Pam,
Thank you.
this is Atashna. First of all, I'd like to say thank you for bringing this up and bringing it before ProSab. Everything you say is correct. And it has been an issue that's rose its head over the years. But as I had said earlier, most people do not know that these parks exist.
And I think
And
Pam hit the nail on the head.
For a while. I've lived here in Nederland for a bit of time now, but I lived a mile outside of town, and just a year ago I moved into town. So I really haven't been paying a whole lot of attention to what the townies are doing. But now that I'm here and I'm outside and I'm gardening and people are walking by and they're like, howdy doody and chatting, I'm like, well, wait, I haven't even heard this. I didn't even know we had little pockets of land in town.
yes.
I think Atashna and Pam both hit the nail on the head too when you mentioned just the ability to manage. And Atashna has already, mentioned our kind of lack of funds and the lack of staff time that we have to do stuff like that. So we're looking for some practical and creative solutions and ideas about how, to make something like this happen.
I would like to give quite an interesting example of this, I think, that is just good for us to think about. And that is that there was one of these pocket parks that was actually the subject of litigation recently, where private property owners attempted to essentially force the town to give the property up to them because they had argued that it had been abandoned. And that is, kind of part of the issue. When it looks like private property, public residents don't use it, right? They don't approach it because it seems like it's somebody else's stuff and somebody else's land.
Right.
And so you have this issue where then over time, once they've used it enough and kind of blocked people out by parking their cars in front of it or building a fence around it or something like that, they can then go to court and argue that they actually own the land and the town has no right to it. One of the things cited,
it's called adverse right of use.
Right, exactly. And one of the things cited in this particular case was that the road sign that had previously been there originally had been taken down by the town. And it's very interesting because I actually found the sign. I found the road sign in the Harvest House, the marijuana dispensary, on display as like an item of like a tchotchke item, which I thought was very strange, right? So it's like, one of the things used in court is the fact that this sign is missing, and then I found the bloody sign. So it's a very strange situation that some of these properties are in. And I do think it would be really beneficial for us to do a full catalog of all these properties, because they are not represented, not all of them are represented on any of the maps that I've seen. And I think we really do need to map it all out, identify what they are, start giving them names, and then start figuring out what to do with them.
They do have names, Eric. However,
Have
the
names.
parks just look like vacant, overgrown lots.
Attachment,
There's
you're-
no
You're
distinctions.
referring to the ones listed on the map. Eric is all saying that there are ones that are not listed on the
Yeah,
map.
there's so much more than what's listed on the map.
So we have
Oh, yeah.
Tilton
Yeah.
Park and Angel Park are named and listed on the map. They're not identified in in person when you go to those locations. But there's
Oh.
also other locations that are not identified on the map or in person.
There's only one that I know of that's identified in person, and that's Joe Smith Park,
Yeah,
who was
those
a
ones.
county commissioner in the 50s, and that's the only park that is officially identified.
Those
Did
are
anybody
different.
get that little Facebook post that I put on there and some of the maps that I pulled up, like South Johnson Street, how South Johnson ends at
Oh,
what is it, Spring, but it actually the right of way continues on through between Spring and Breed, and it's owned
And that's
by
precisely
somebody.
the property I'm talking about.
Yeah, I don't know
Yeah.
who owns the town right of ways. And when we look at Caribou Street also, how it stops, the houses that claim that they're on Caribou Street have West Pine Street addresses. However, they can park on Caribou because it's not a through street anymore and it's been blocked off on one end. And then the residents there have now claimed that as their personal parking lot. And so those are two of the things that I noticed just in looking at maps, like, well, where does Johnson Street go? And why is that a thorough? And why is that being claimed now as private land when it's a street right away?
Could you pull that map up again, Miranda, real quick, if you're at all able to?
You want the trails
Just
map or the zoning
Yeah,
map?
just either one. I guess the trails map. Just a bit of resolution.
this is all like the historic funk of Nederland that needs to start being cataloged.
You can kind of zoom in on it a little bit, but yeah, there's plenty that are, those ones are obviously not identified.
Mhm.
South Johnson. So next steps. I mean, would this be a good place to do? Some of these places be a good place to do some of these noxious weed pulls over the summer too. Maybe we could get some faces down at these two pocket parks at least and start helping.
I think so, but I mean, if Pam is offering to do some volunteer work along with ProSab, I think the best possible work we could do is start to identify whether or not these are private property or public lands, whether or not the town owns them, where they are, start marking them out on a map, and start giving them names, and then start working on it.
And if nothing else, let the town start an ownership. And I know they might actually own it, but they do run into that 18-year clause where if somebody has a fence on it, it can become theirs.
So what would be the process? I mean, going through the assessor's website to figure out land ownership?
Yeah, if you look at what Kathleen is posting in the chat, it is slightly different for town right of way and properties, like public property versus private property. So I think it's a more complicated issue, and it's not as easy just to adversely possess public lands. But I do think it's still a worthy exercise to identify what exactly the town owns, and this is not something that town staff are really going to be able to do. I think we do need to make this a coordinated volunteer effort.
So town staff are actually already doing that under the encroachment ordinance. So that's set to come before the board in July, and the board of trustees had asked us to identify how many properties. So the work is actually already being done, which I'm comfortable, and then can turn over that same data to ProSab for this discussion, since it's slightly different than the encroachment one.
Great, and that will really help, and I think in identifying these pocket parks and whether or not ProSap wants to kind of take ownership of them as the Parks and Rec Advisory Board and start to come up with ways that they can be better used and accessed by residents.
Yeah.
That seems like a nice, clear first step. I like it.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess that then my thought would be that we would show, provide that list information for ProSap to then review in July. And so Kathleen brings up a great point in here. So we are too using the assessor's office, their property viewer, to do our encroachment. Now, without a true survey, which would cost a significant amount of money, we're using the information to the best of our ability. But I think Kathleen brings up a great point here that it is not true survey boundary lines. It's just kind of the free version we have to work with for now.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't think
it
you
still
need to
gets us
go
in the right
into
direction.
Yeah, I
Sorry,
think
Pam,
I
go.
agree.
But in that process, we may find a really attractive pocket park or piece of town property that maybe we could turn into something that's for a specific use. For instance, like a dog park, or for instance, a child playground. And if we do that, then we can maybe get that properly assessed and surveyed, really define that single park and make it into something as a kind of demonstration of what these pocket parks can be, and then
Yes.
continue to work on them over time. But without sort of that template to go by, it's really difficult when you're just looking at the whole scope of the town and looking at all of these pocket parks and wondering what to do with them. But as long as we figure out
Yeah.
what's the most attractive and most interesting project to start on, I think we will have somewhere to go from there.
Yeah.
How does that sound to you, Pam?
Sounds great. Sounds great. I think it sounds exciting to figure out what goes where and what the future might hold, and just make sure that it is preserved, even if it isn't put into use right away. Make sure that it is preserved for the town for future use.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thank you. This is something that we seem to ends up on the agenda once or twice every year. So it is nice to
Yeah.
actually kind of force it into some kind of movement here. That's
Mm-hmm.
very much appreciated, Pam.
Just keep me posted on how I can help.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pam.
You're welcome.
And kind of similarly, moving on just to the next item real quick, we've just had a few requests from residents also to address or discuss the nesting swallows, the removal of nests at the post office of swallows, and we've had a few messages on this. I know we've had a few board responses too. I can give you a quick feedback, kind of a specific one that we had. It was just do we have the money in the budget to use some of the Barker Park grant to build a swallow's nest? So I just had to, I just replied with, there's no more flexible money left in that particular grant.
But Jesse, I've been working on with code enforcement and the police department on this, so I'd like to fill in some information gap if I could. So the post office actually reached out to Boulder County Open Space and U.S. Fish and Wildlife, and they gave them permission to destroy the nest. They stated that once the eggs have been laid, you can't destroy nests, but prior to that you can. So they didn't just do it without prior permission. So they did get the green light from them. Kind of secondary to that, they are a federal agency, and therefore town code doesn't necessarily have that jurisdiction, which is why U.S. Fish and Wildlife is who they receive permission from. Now, I'm not saying that it's great what happened, but I just think that clarification needs to go out there that they are in fact permitted to do what they're doing.
Yeah.
Okay, but there must be some kind of, moral or historic precedence here, because now the swallows probably won't be back this year. And this is the time of year when they lay their eggs, and now they're homeless, they're traumatized, and they're historic. They've been around here a lot longer than a lot of these people.
So I'll just tell you a little bit about what Sally Brady kind of wrote to us, the ProSap board. she was interested in a structure being built in the new park going up, some kind of swallow nest. She had a picture of it. And I explained to her there's nothing left to spare in the budget. That was approved in March, and we're already cutting things out to be able to water the plantings going in. And also all of this grant had to address like direct COVID related impacts at this time. But I do support, trying to find the birds' nesting places, whether that is in Barker Reservoir. So I just suggested, I said, if any kind of any kind of structure going into Barker Meadows area needs to be approved by the ProSab, and this year there's very little time to help the swallows this year anyway. So I suggested she contact some builders, get a quote on how much some of these structures cost, and then try and find the funding and a location for it. So I guess one of the things for the board to consider would be, if there was space, would ProSab be interested in pursuing a structure for swallow nesting in that area?
I think that there's a lot more to it because these are migratory birds. It's like somebody removing all the geese from the reservoir. This is they have their migratory patterns and they're here every year. So what you're essentially talking about is breaking their migratory pattern.
We're just a volunteer board here trying to come up with some solutions for the future. The nests have been knocked down, not by any of us, so we're just trying to come up with some ideas here.
I understand that, but I'm thinking, and I'm not opposed to it.
But what are you proposing as a solution? Like, we know the problem.
I'm not sure if there is one that ProSab can really rectify. It may just be out of our hands. It may be in the hands of someone else who has the experience with migratory birds and rerouting them, changing their habits or something.
I brings up a good point in that I think it's best to ask Fish and Wildlife.
Mm-hmm.
They're obviously aware that this happened. What is their recommendation? If we wanted to provide additional nesting space, what do they think? Again, we've talked to them now as police department, and they have been, it looks like they've been involved in this for a couple of weeks now. So we could always ask that contact.
Mm-hmm.
And
I think that my solution would be to get rid of those people who run the post office and, keep the swallows, let the swallows stay and get rid of those people. Some of them that I know personally, and there's a lot of people who wear masks, and that's all I'll say about that. Get rid of the people, keep the swallows.
Okay, so contact Fish and Wildlife is a real good practical thing to start off with. I think that would.
I do think Facebook and obviously the court of public opinion is out there. People are outraged and they've expressed such. I think where it becomes tricky is town code doesn't necessarily have the jurisdiction there. And again, our code also does mirror that if there are no eggs or chicks in it, that it can be destroyed. And so I think that in addition to talking to Fish and Wildlife, if people are concerned, they need to continue to contact the post office and express that and kind of drive them to potentially make decisions. Now they have already been knocked down, but it's my understanding that swallows are looking to rebuild. And so the hope is that the post office heard the public outcry. But I would just, could recommend that there continue to be pressure or people are advocating for their desires for those nests to stay where they are.
Yeah, that staff is real receptive.
All right, continue to advocate. Let's stay. We'll keep floating this, and we'll keep it on our.
Yeah,
radar.
like I said, Larry is already connected with Fish and Wildlife, that group. So I'll just jump into that conversation and ask what their thoughts are and get back to ProSab.
Would this be the kind of thing that would be useful to have a ProSab vote on whether we would like to support endorsing the just try and let the swallows continue nesting in that area?
I mean, I think if ProSab wanted to make a recommendation that the Board of Trustees issue a formal letter of request, I think that would be the appropriate route to go and put I know this is a concern for Trustee Corvalin, and so, you know, and you could make that recommendation if you'd like the town to weigh in formally.
Okay. I mean, that seems pretty reasonable thing just for us to go around and discuss. Do you have any more do you have some questions?
I don't mind kind of having a vote on this, but I'm not totally convinced that it's under ProSab's jurisdiction to make a recommendation on this.
Yeah.
It's about birds attaching to a building that doesn't have anything to do with parks or recreation or open space. So, like, I think a lot of us have opinions, but I don't know if we have formal opinions in our capacity as ProSab members.
Right. And it is just, I mean, it's just a piece of advice coming from the advisory board, like just another piece of paper that you can say the board could use.
Sure. I think, like, I mean, I guess DDA could have a piece of advice. Sustainability board could have a piece of advice. Like,
yeah, exactly.
Any of these are equally valid. I just don't know if ProSab's voice in this has particular weight.
No, but maybe if every single advisory board could weigh in and offer the advocate for the BOT to write issue a formal letter request of to leave the swallow nests remaining, that could be helpful.
Well, the other thing is, you know, like I could see where they have swallow nests over the very front of the post office, right? But like the other 2 to 3 sides of the post office, having swallows there would not be a big deal. I mean, it shouldn't cause a lot of issues, right? But I could see where, like, okay, in the very front where people are walking in and out, you know, that's why they don't want to have things falling on people, et cetera, right? So, I mean, maybe there's like a middle ground there where, like, they keep one little area clear and the other parts they don't worry about.
Do they nest on all sides?
No, they nest on the east side and the south side. And the only areas that one might consider a problem would be the nests that they put over the entry doors. And it would be very easy to just take those 2 nests down and leave the rest undisturbed.
Right. So that's what, like, come up with some kind of thing that when you if people want to do that, like, okay, here's a solution that kind of helps both parts of the argument, and you know, instead of just not addressing what the concerns are, which I'm guessing, I don't know, that the post office has. You know.
Yeah, the custodian there doesn't want to wash the windows more than he has to. That's what the issue is. I'm going to mute myself because I'm too close to this on a personal level. So I'll mute myself so you can't hear what I have to say.
Have a little yell. Well, I'm totally fine with asking around the board to see if ProSab would like to recommend sending a piece of advice or recommendation that we would be interested in supporting the swallow nests stay there, and issue a formal letter of request from the BOT.
I'm up for saying that, like, you know, maybe a little 1 or 2 people from ProSab are willing to be members to come up with a solution, you know, and you know, if we put that forward, then we're trying to be part of the solution. Because I don't think that's going to be an answer, and it's going to take a little while to get the answer.
Just trying to figure out how to word it. I'm so tired.
Maybe it's something along the lines of, you know, are you in support of, I had it just for a second. Are you in support of finding a solution to allow swallow nests to remain on the Nederland post office?
Right. What Eric said. Let's give an eye and
I like that.
Yes or no to that?
Yes.
All
John's
right.
a yes.
John is yes. Eric, yes. Atashna, are you in support of finding a solution to allow the swallows to continue nesting at the post office? Atashna.
Yes.
Brian.
Sure. Aye.
Yes. Chris.
I think that it should be done to get together with Fish and Wildlife and find an alternative place for them to be nearby so that they could still be there. When I was little, we had a swallow's nest that was in our garage and pooped all over the cars. We just moved their nest outside the garage and made a little shelter over it, and they happily ever after stayed there. So
Perhaps it's to find a solution to allow swallows to nest in the vicinity of the post office.
yeah. And I think that in tune with that, we should get together with the Fish and Wildlife people and see about having a nearby structure on the property of the post office that they can assist in building.
That sounds like working towards a solution to me.
Yeah.
Great. I'm happy
So
with
it's
forward.
how you're wording it is the thing that the post office is going to have the hardest time with.
Right.
So
So
you just
it sounds like the
that's
press
kind
up.
of ended for
Yeah.
getting the information to make a solution to the problem.
So it sounds like the ProSAP is in unanimous support of finding a solution to keep the swallows nesting at either the post office or in the vicinity of the post office. And
There
that is
we
what
go.
ProSAP
That's better.
supports.
Well said.
All right. Thank you.
But you just don't do it while they're in meeting and family season.
Yeah, that's pretty short-sighted.
Yeah.
Any further comments before we move on? Bike park, this will be like 2 minutes, hopefully. I just got contacted by Jesse Sievers again from, I think it's High Performance Earthworks, who is also interested in rekindling a discussion, looking at various properties for bike park possibilities. Do you have something on that, Eric? I feel like you...
Well, I mean, I just had an informal conversation with him, sitting
Yeah.
on a log, down by the road. But he also mentioned that he would be willing to offer maintenance for any bike park that was constructed for 2 years after it was constructed, with the idea that he could pass that off to somebody else after those 2 years were up, and he could help kind of train someone else to maintain it, and that could be a rotating responsibility. So that is at least what I heard from him.
Okay. So, I mean,
There's two locations that I had outlined when I made a report about this, pre-COVID.
yeah, I mean, that would be very helpful to have just a whole list of potential.
Well, those two locations were, one was at the end of Lakeview on the lake side. The other one was next to the top of Conger, right next to the I don't know what you call it, the basket place, the basket factory. But it still comes back to, in my opinion, what we need to do. This has to not be ProSAP. This has to come from the stakeholders.
Which it is right now. Someone is literally coming forward and offering to donate $20,000 of their own personal.
Yes, but that's not the stakeholders. The stakeholders are the parents and the kids who will be using it.
I'm pretty
They
sure.
need to put
I'm
the
pretty
work
sure it's
in.
not just altruistic too. I'm pretty sure that he is a stakeholder.
Oh, yeah,
So.
yeah. But if we can contact the teens and parent groups in the area.
Great, Kashna, you can do that. I'm going to set you to contact the teens and contact any of the parents and stakeholders.
Well, what I'll do is I'll write up I'll write up something for the newspaper and for everyone to circulate on the anti-social media sites in
No,
town.
that would be perfect. Just get some feedback on kind of their thoughts about
Because it has to come from the stakeholders. We cannot be involved in doing everything for
I
everybody.
totally agree, but we have to solicit the input from the stakeholders. That's kind of in that stage.
Yeah. I will also say that he suggested the triangular piece of land that is at the end of First Street going down towards the reservoir. That is kind of, it's before you get to the parking lot that's next to Teens Inc. And it's sort of a nebulous area. I'm not sure who owns what over there, but there is kind of a large patch of grass that he suggested.
That's the Fisherman's Park, like Kathleen says.
Right. I wasn't sure. I didn't actually see it with him, so I didn't know if he meant Fisherman's Park or not. But
yeah, it's hard to know from that kind of description.
The description is very vague, but there was a spot down there that he thought might be viable for a smaller, more children-focused bike park, rather than kind of like a professional bikers doing, fancy tricks on big jumps and things like that, which he thinks might not be the best way to start a bike park.
Oh, yeah.
If we want to get people involved, it's got to be accessible to kids. Yeah.
Yeah,
I think he probably is if he's talking about a triangular, because this is your triangular piece right by First. But as everyone's noted, this is Fisherman's Lot, and we are moving forward with the Eldora Wetlands project. So. Okay.
Yeah, I think that's what he was looking at. I can't be absolutely sure.
Can a non-ProSab person interject anything?
Yeah, please do. Can you just say who's speaking? Is that you, Pam?
This is Pam. This is Pam Hill speaking. Hi. Who is handling the liability and the risk management of any sort of bike park?
If it's on town property, it would then have to be identified as a town asset and looped into our liability insurance.
Okay.
Which would operate in the same way as the skate park, I imagine, and the tennis courts.
I mean, there are situations in which, that there could be negotiation that if there's another entity that manages it, like Ned Rink and that type of thing, that they maintain a liability. But they are a formal organization versus like a private entity that gets a little bit tough. So I think another question is there an opportunity for an organization like Ned Rink or the tennis courts to take over something like this?
Yeah, there's so many different avenues you could like, but this is again, it's still just in like pure conceptual stages. There are so many aspects we would have to like do a deep dive into.
This is Chris. Can I say something?
Yes, please do.
We are an advisory board, right? To the town board. When we had the skate park built, the skate park entity came to my second board meeting and said, we want to build a skate park. Can we find a piece of land that we can do this on, so on and so forth? They had their own people lined up. They had their own excavators and builders and everything else lined up. So as an advisory board, if nobody's done that yet, except for we have an excavator, it's not our job as an advisory board to make and design and build a bike park.
Exactly.
Our avenue is, all right, we are the mediators between town public works. We're the mediators between the town board. Somebody comes to us and says, all right, we have engineered plans for a bike park. This is what it looks like. This is what it's going to cost to build. We have an excavator that'll give us $20,000 in time for it. What could the town do to help us out? And how do we move forward in making this into fruition? So that is what I look at it as. We are not ones who take on building a bike park.
No, I don't think anyone was suggesting that. I think step one, we were just saying, identify appropriate locations for, even the concept.
But still, if nobody
again,
has
that's not our job.
It's not our job. Exactly. Our job is to be the liaisons between the ones who want to build it and the town board and public works.
So it would be the town board to up to the town board to identify the potential location.
No, the people who want the bike park. Jesse,
They need to know. They need to know what the town staff information has. They need to know what is public property, what the even options are. They can't just be like, we want to build it here, something that's not even town land.
Okay, so we have an excavator. I mean,
look,
it's a little bit like the car.
He just suggested the triangular land. Clearly, that is going to be turned into wetland rehabilitation. Wetland rehabilitation. So if you
most people in this town
throwing out ideas.
Yes, but most people in this town see vacant land and they think all kinds of things. They have ideas on all kinds of things for it, but they don't know the reality of the land.
Having the excavator come up with the actual locations is just a kind of a silly thing to do.
Well, I'm not saying the excavator, the people
job, and
the excavator is offering his expertise. However, he needs to go to the people who are interested in having the bike park. It's kind of like the cart before the horse. Those people have to come forward. They can join with the excavator, move forward on it, and then come to us with, like Chris was saying, hey, we have this great idea. Can you help us move it forward?
And then we would say, these are the locations that you could put it. So you're still getting to the same.
Well, it's up to them to do the work, not us.
Yeah.
So they would just yeah, carry on. Right.
This is Pam Hill again. If we had those maps available of the public lands, I think that this conversation about the bike park relates closely to the pocket parks and the dog parks and the children's parks, and any other idea that some townie comes up with is, oh, I'd like to have this. If we had a really clear indicator, a clear map that said, this is the land that the town of Nederland owns.
Yeah, these are the options available. Let's analyze, you have to analyze these options.
Yeah.
And it's not up to random residents to decide. That is a collaborative between the town and stakeholders. That is a collaboration.
Right, and I think it's okay for you to point direction for people, but I don't think that it's your job to. Well, I don't know that you guys want to give up more of your free time to plan bike parks or to plan dog parks or whatever. You guys have donated so much of your life already to the town that well, I wouldn't know where to start with a pump track or a bike track or anything. But yeah, I think that's the same thing, is if people have a clear idea of what land is available, then maybe they wouldn't push so hard on you.
We have a question from Kathleen in chat. It just says, what happened to the idea of putting bike park by the ice rink, which was discussed last year? I mean, I think that's still an open potential. That is definitely not what the ice rink or Ned rink people would like, though, too. So it's kind of a fine dance.
Yes, they express a lot of resistance to that idea, though. That Jesse still sees that as a very viable and even ideal location for it. But he was just trying to come up with other solutions. But again, that's the issue, is that he doesn't actually know what the options are. And so without some clarity on what they are, it's impossible for him to come up with an idea of where he might put the thing. Even though he can build it, he doesn't know where.
Well, that's why Pam's suggestion, I think, is excellent.
Which is exactly what we're all saying. We're all saying the same thing here.
Yeah.
Different. Yeah. But that's great. I mean, again, it's about identifying appropriate locations and getting more information.
Well, and then the other thing is that long-term, if there's super involved people and then they roll out because their children grow up or something, like what is the town left with at the end of the day, right? And I think that was one of the things that we were going to be thinking about just in general, right? And I think this would flip into that.
Yeah,
that's what happened with the the ice rink. When the person from the ice rink came and talked with us, that was something that she was saying about how volunteers drop off as their kids grow up.
Exactly. I think that's what we discussed. We said ProSab is not interested in forming another non-profit to deal with another town recreational amenity, because we just don't have, we do not and they do not. It's not a sustainable long-term model for maintenance. So why the idea of concrete is not being discussed here too.
Yeah, well, it comes back to inventory, having a real inventory of the town property that is available for future use for whatever, and then letting people know what, making that public information, so that I think that would help guide people.
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen, Miranda grew up here. I've been here for 40 years. And the town is really, in the past maybe 10 years, the town has started evolving, not just growing, but evolving. And it's difficult in many ways because we still have, despite the growth and the evolution, we still have very limited resources and a whole lot of ignorance.
I mean, I think we've got some healthy, kind of productive things to move forward with that. I think a big part of so many things that are tied together tonight is just a theme about identifying different properties.
Yes.
And the town-owned lands and availability. If there are any other questions, now is the time to raise them on this topic. Otherwise, we'll try and crank through some of the resilient community stuff just as quick as possible. We have some budget stuff to go over. The updated site plan got sent out today. Looks like a lot of the plantings are being moved back to outside the perimeter of the wastewater treatment plant. Thank you, Miranda.
Do you want me to, I can't remember where we left off, so there might be some benefit in just reviewing this in its entirety of all the changes. Do you want me to just do that really quick?
That would be amazing. Thank you so much.
Great. So I'll scroll to the more zoomed in, but just for the sake of seeing it all. As you'll see in this northern part, it was requested by City of Boulder that we actually end the trail right here towards the fields expansion. The original thought was to pull the path up and around, but we have some culvert issues up here, and so it just seemed in best interest to end here. We'll be putting up signage for people who park in this northern lot that the trail entrance is down through the parking lot here, and so well signed, but that's one of the changes there. And then as Jesse noted, the other change is that originally there was landscaping kind of both in and outside the fence line. While you do see there are some that are tight up against the fence, these are in fact all on the outskirts of the fence line. Given our irrigation conversation, there is a chance that this trail may have to move slightly north. I don't necessarily foresee an issue there, but that's been the other change. And then lastly, we had asked that this driveway, there was originally a bunch of landscaping over here because of the driveway and how we would access wastewater. This is now just pretty open and will be just used as the roadway. So those are the three major changes since we last met. So again, I sent this out so you can see, here's the close-up where you see where the trail end is. And then there'll be a lot of signage up here asking, that people be mindful of the area, that it's really a regrowth zone and to stick to the trail. And then, sorry, bear with me. And then again, here's that closer up. And while I just want to make sure that even though some of these circles appear like they're going over, it's really just tight up against that fence line. So kind of the question before the board, to the advisory board tonight is, do you approve of this site plan? I think what we want is ProSab to vote in approval, assuming you do. And that way we can put it before the Board of Trustees and say, this is the site plan. This is what we're moving forward with. And then Public Works knows what exactly they're building from. So that's question number one. Now, Jesse, can I jump into question two and then we can break that apart?
Yeah,
question two is, because of where we moved that irrigation, we now need to talk about funding, or where we moved the landscaping, we need to talk about funding for a drip system. So in my email to you, which I pulled up here, we had discussed some ways in which we could free up around $23,000 that should cover the cost of a drip system as well as the design. Our landscape architects do contract with a company that does just solely irrigation systems, so they would design it for us. But our thought for savings is to remove the trail grader. Public Works did not feel like that was needed, and then we could reduce the bench count from 15 to 10. We could reduce the tree count from 100 to 75. And the last thing is the recycling and trash receptacles are actually being donated to us. So that's a savings in and of itself, that 9,000. But these 4 areas we thought could free up the funding needed for both the irrigation and the design. But we're looking for ProSab to also express voted support, the majority. That's the route you would want to move forward in order to free up those funds, because I have to file a modification of grant with GOCO. Now, I've already talked to GOCO and they're aware this is coming. They were in support of what we're looking to do. They don't want our landscaping to die. So that's the great thing, but I have to file the paperwork and of course want ProSab's formal approval before I do so.
Miranda?
Jesse, did I capture it? Or yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I see Natasha shaking the benches too. It was actually discussed that the benches were removed from 15 to 11 to 12, which would, each bench is 880. But most of the money would be coming from the trash and recycling receptacles, of which all of them have been donated by the city of Boulder, or is it Boulder County? I'd have to check. So that's 9,000. That would be 9,200 of the budget going towards drip systems, and that would be the first place that the money would come out, and then it would. So there's be a priority like list. So the first 9,200. Do you want to pull up the budget maybe? The first 9,000. Yeah, would come from there.
In talking with the irrigation team, they do feel that around $20,000 is going to be needed. And so, and I should have put this in my email, I apologize. So we potentially are looking at all 4 options here in order to free up the funding needed to make the design and the irrigation happen. Because, you know, obviously too, if we add irrigation, we just don't want to kind of free for all it. We'd like to have, Public Works really wants to have set site plans saying exactly what they're doing, so there's no question about what goes where. And so I do think we'd be looking at all 4 items here to make that funding work.
Okay, great. That's helpful.
And to your point, Jesse, I did cut this down to 10 benches. Now it could easily jump back up to 11 or 12 because this 23,000 gives us like a $3,000 buffer.
And remember, this is stuff that like, it's not going to be hard to include more benches in the future. Like this is not the end of it all.
My concern is the number of benches being cut. I'm looking at it from the perspective of people who have, who don't have the energy and stamina and endurance of even a 50-year-old in many cases.
So where would you prefer that money be cut from?
Well, I understand that it does have to be cut. However, 5 benches seems like a lot.
It just needs to be cut from somewhere. So you just need to suggest a different place that it could be cut from.
Well, I mean, I'm okay with cutting benches, but not 5. I mean, can we just cut 2?
We just don't have the money for that. I mean, maybe mulch, I think, too, Miranda, was something that we were looking at reducing.
Yeah, I know. I know we didn't fully talk about the amount we would reduce from mulch, so that's why I didn't put it in my email. And we only have $5,000 in mulch anyways, and so
that could possibly be like one bench could be saved, could be used for that.
To your point, Natasha, each bench costs $880. So if we can really get it where the irrigation and the design is $20,000, that $3,000 that we originally cut could then be put back into purchasing the 4 benches we potentially might lose in this initial proposal of the $20,000.
Okay,
and I encourage you to take a walk around too. There are some flags in the ground too where the benches are located. 10 benches is a huge improvement, and there's also 4 to 5 picnic benches. So that is I mean, there's 2 benches on each picnic bench, so there is going to be like almost 20 new benches going in. That's okay.
That's a lot of benches for that
It's
area.
a lot of benches for that area.
But I agree that if we do with your prioritized financing, then if some money does come back, we can make it 11 or we can make it 12. So you know, that's what we're saying. So it seems like the 10 bench plus the other ones you're talking about seems good.
Okay, how do you feel about
Are they coming back?
What?
How is the money coming back? You said we could get more benches?
If the actual come back and there's an extra $2,000, then you could buy to 2 more benches into it.
Right. Because I'm anticipating the cost will be $20,000, but because of the way in which I'm proposing the cut, it frees up $23,100. If we can keep it to $20,000, that's $3,000 to go right back into buying 4 benches.
Okay, so there's like a contingency there. Okay. Okay, thanks for explaining that. I understand.
Chris,
oh, sorry, go ahead, Chris.
What happened with this whole adopt a bench thing that we were discussing about a year ago? That could possibly be a mechanism to get benches?
Yeah, it's actually an active program. And so we do have people who contact us all the time. We're in contact with a woman who is interested in purchasing a bench. So I would say from a memorializing standpoint, people are very eager to purchase benches for their loved ones.
So we could use that as an avenue.
Yeah.
Nice.
And the other aspect is with the watering system, if you have the landscaping and stuff on the outside of the septic area, septic thing, using gray water from the septic, cleaning and stuff like that to water.
So this came up last time, and so there's a series of regulations for the gray water. It is not, Chris is not necessarily comfortable just because of the regulatory nature of that. His request is that ProSab just consider drip system and tapping into our water line, which is already over there. We have a water tap in the area, and going that route versus navigating the regulations surrounding use of gray water in public spaces like that.
They do it on golf courses all the freaking time. But anyway,
to that end,
something to consider later.
To that end, I was wondering about that myself.
Let's move to approve this and send it going the right way. And let's approve with, Public Works being a part of this discussion and move forward to getting it to the board.
So, and I would like to hear from Eric. I just want to clarify that I'm representing Public Works, and so this conversation has already been had with them, just to clarify.
Okay.
Miranda, sounds like a movement, and I second that movement.
I'm asking Miranda if
we're just going to let Eric just ask this question here, and then we can do that.
Would this preclude using gray water as part of the irrigation system?
It wouldn't. I mean, I know that the feeling was we were happy to continue to look into it, but Chris didn't want to kind of have full reliance on that being the means we use for the landscaping, and so no, it does not preclude continuing to navigate the use of gray water.
Right. So in the design of this irrigation system, it would be nice if the design wasn't such that it could only be used tapping into our drinking water. It would be nice if it could also potentially be a gray water system, because I don't think that the regulations are as onerous as that document makes it look.
Right.
Yeah, well, I think the great thing is in talking with Confluent Design, they actually use, like I said, they use a company that specializes in irrigation, and so I'm sure that it's called Aqua Engineering, and so I'm sure that they can provide a lot more information about the use of gray water. I'm imagining it's not their first rodeo with it, so I'm supposed to have a call with them next week, and I'm happy to get more information on their experience using gray water.
All right.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you. Good question, Eric. That was excellent. So So yeah, just take a look at the site plan, and I like John's motion. Let's go ahead and decide if you're going to support motioning to approve the site plan as it stands, and then we can get this in front of the BOT by the date?
July 6th.
July 6th.
I guess one other point of clarification, just because the site plan has taken a bit longer to finalize.
Yeah.
I did talk to GoCo about using both this summer and next summer to complete the project. They were completely fine with that. We have until September 2022, so no concerns there. But Nikki feels positive. I mean, we still have the youth corps team, and they're willing to help us next year as well, but she thinks we could still crank out a large majority of this grant before it's winter, before we know it. But we luckily do have that cushion of next summer if needed.
That was really helpful. So the youth corps team are now planned to kind of spread out their 15 hours between this summer and next summer.
Yep.
But still be employed for the duration of the hours. But they're not withholden to doing it within the time frame. So GoCo have been very generous in like extending our time frame here.
Shall we vote?
We shall. Shall we do alphabetically?
Part of it.
Yeah, Chris, do you have a comment?
I just want to make sure that the stage and amphitheater area is still part of it.
There's no stage.
Thought
There's no stage in this plan. But it is the Barker Meadow is just to be left open. For there's nothing that would stop a future stage. But this plan does not incorporate the stage.
Right.
That's due to this type of grant that we have.
Yeah. And we're parks and recreation and not, entertainment.
Right.
So.
No, but just that is an avenue that's still put there when we did the whole power supply there.
Oh, yeah.
So as far as the discussion, I just want it to be still there, that it is an option of future discussion.
Yes.
And I say let's move forward with sending this to the Board of Trustees.
Right, we'll do it in reverse order this time. John.
Aye.
Eric.
Yes.
Chris.
Yes.
Brian.
Yes.
Atashna.
Yes.
Myself, yes. Site plan is approved to send to the BOT. Still have some updates on this, mostly kind of just on the art installation. So I'm in contact with the artist still. We're going to start sourcing wood. We need wood of all diameters and length. The Chinook students are actually going to be working on this week of 7th to the 10th of September. So we need to start sourcing wood of all diameters and length, working on putting together some media for this. We need freshly cut willow, cottonwood, and other more flexible woods of at least 5 feet in length are ideal. Willow needs to be fairly freshly cut. He would do the weaving with that. He's going to work with the Chinook students and some other students and youth groups to kind of build this. Also sourcing large pine logs, fir, oak, etc. for more seating areas. There will be a drop-off area for wood at the Nederland area forestry sort yard, and most likely at some select other locations in and around Boulder County, including Longmont, for the wood donations. Questions about that?
Sounds like we're talking about a lot of wood.
Yeah, a lot of wood.
Hmm.
So we're just going to be starting to put the media out there for that. Nikki's kind of coordinating with the forestry people in and around Boulder County and Longmont. For that, we also I've been in discussions recently with the artist and his team. He's working in Denver, putting up a bunch of these nests for the library, Denver library system this summer. So he'll be here and be able to pop up and visit the area. We did not budget for and he did not tell me because he's a wishy-washy artist type, that they do not have lodging set for that time. And so I'm now looking into trying to source some like either a house or Airbnb to put him and his team up while they do the building for that week. So I've started a GoFundMe. We're gonna launch that fairly soon just to try and raise some money to put him up in a house for a week. Some of their supplies, we're in contact with Ava Hamilton, who is like an Arapaho advocate, and she is going to hopefully do a land acknowledgement event that week. And there's going to be some other kind of musical events and he's a percussionist, so he would like to do some kind of drum involved in during that week too. So yeah, I'll definitely need kind of some help, especially with the sourcing of wood, because we are going to need a lot for the art installation. That was a lot of information. Sorry, questions on that?
Jesse, how many people on this team are you needing housing for?
4.
4?
Yeah, 4 to 5 people total.
That's why I just wondered if you thought about talking to like we could ask the hotel if they would be willing to donate rooms.
That would be great.
I mean, I don't mind sending out that email, just sharing with them what's going on and seeing if they'll provide that in kind.
Yeah, I mean, that would be incredible.
Mm-hmm.
So that's definitely worth asking. What a great idea. Thank you, Miranda.
There's always Eldora staff housing. No.
I know, I was just thinking the same thing. Like and you know, Ron Mitchell, and you know, you've got some. I think there are some community members who may be able to support, and so I'll make a couple asks. And
yeah, Miranda, you have your finger on the pulse of people who have short-term rental licenses. Yep. You can just say like, we're taking over one of your houses for a week.
Give us a really, really good discount.
Yeah.
I'm happy to just share that this is a thing and see if any of them are open and willing. Yeah, that's cool. On the wood front, I think you were reading off a list, Jesse. Are you going to circulate that around? Because it sounded like some of that stuff was native to the area, some of it's not. I don't really.
Yeah, it's mostly the stuff that is kind of native to the area is really difficult for him to work with. Like the willow here is mostly river willow, and it's usually really narrow diameter. So that's fine for weaving, but he needs like big kind of I'll have to send you the diameters, but bigger, like way bigger than like your hands could fit around for the structural building, like big enough to bolt together. So that suggested cottonwood. And it needs to be kind of slightly flexible. So pine and fir and oak they're not ideal for that. That's kind of stuff is fine for the kind of benches and seating that he would do around it. But for the actual piece, it's he's kind of got a list of woods that he prefers to use. He often
I have a suggestion on that.
Yeah,
if somebody has any contacts, is to contact Boulder County Parks and Open Spaces. They gave the group, they just delivered 80 teepee poles to us for our site outside of Lyons, and they've been very helpful to us in procuring things that we need for our ceremonial site. So if somebody knows someone in Parks and Rec or open space with Boulder County, they know all the places where these types of materials that are being asked for maybe.
Do you think you'd be able to get any emails from that project, from the TB project? Like who was the contacts for that? Do you think you could dig into that?
Oh yeah, because the guy is working up here. This is where we got our teepee poles from.
Yeah, just any kind of contacts like that are going to be really useful. We are reaching out to like the Boulder County Forestry Sort Yards and the Longmont Sort Yards. They all kind of work. Apparently, Nikki, says they all work in cahoots. So we're sending out some with them and trying to set up some collection points down below too.
Okay, I'll see about getting an email for one of the guys.
So yeah, that was kind of a slow start, but we've been working with Ariel over at Teens Inc. kind of just trying to coordinate some dates and times for that, and dates and times for him as his summer schedule gets kind of further on. And it is kicking off. I'm fingers crossed, and I'm hopeful that this is going to happen. It would be awesome. Here, where am I? Any other questions on that? Awesome. Last item. We just want to discuss meeting format, kind of what our thoughts and feelings are about the future of meetings, how they're going to look like when we want to return to in-person meeting, hybrid format, etc. Yeah, please tell me what you feel about that.
Hey,
I like not having to go anywhere.
just for my benefit, because I joined in the pandemic, can you give us a rundown of how these used to happen in the before times?
Well, I know John had a good point too. Like we were often meeting in the lower level of the community center in the teeny tiny community room. Assuming that is not going to happen in the future. But yeah, maybe Miranda could clarify kind of what that would look like.
Yeah, I think the one time where that's happened, and you're right, it was like happened right before the pandemic, was when SAB and ProSAB end up on the same night. And so I think your request could be when SAB ends up on a holiday, which is pretty often for them, that they maybe pick a different night rather than pushing another group somewhere else, but having it in the multi-purpose room. Now, in terms of like returning back to in-person, it's really advisory board specific. Not all members of the Board of Trustees are ready, and they will be our last to come back just because of definitely the need for virtual hybrid capacity. Something we're working on, but we'd love to test it with ProSAB if you're open and coming back to having your July meeting in person, so we could test drive our ability to do, have some people join via WebEx and others, and then the rest in person. But we're kind of really looking to see not everyone took the survey, and again, not everyone's comfortable returning back, and so really looking to you on what format. We're not at a place though where we can have half the board on WebEx and half the board in a room. We haven't worked out those kinks yet, so it's kind of all or none. Everyone's coming back in person or everyone's staying virtual for the time being.
Would it be the 15th of July? Is that the date of the next ProSAB meeting?
I think that sounds right. Yep,
yes,
that's right.
15th.
I'll put out my selfish comment. As you guys know, in the summer, I'm out and about, so I'll be in Alaska for 4 weeks. So for July, I'm either have to miss the meeting if it's in person, but I could do the virtual. But I'm not opposed to having us move towards that meeting back in the main room there, not the small tiny room, but the main room, or some kind of double one would be, like you could do virtual and in-house whenever we're ready for it.
I think one thing would be different, Brian, than ProSAB. So ProSAB typically just met around a table. We are going to need ProSAB and SAB to be formal in the way the DDA, Planning Commission, BOT are, where everyone sits in front of a microphone, because we can't do virtual without that capacity. So that'll be kind of nice, is that we'll structure it as we do the other three boards and set the room up like a Board of Trustees meeting.
Okay, so that's good to know.
I can speak next. I'm open to anything. I'm happy to meet in person. I'm happy to keep it virtual. I think we should experiment with how hybrid run meetings can work in the future. Maybe not for the first instance, but I think that hybrid will be a reality going forward for things like this. And we should nut out sooner than later how it might work.
Yeah, I think we are looking for advisory boards to help us with that. And I think, again, we want to work out the kinks before we get to the level of Board of Trustees. And so we would be looking to ProSAB and SAB and DDA and Planning Commission to help us work through some of those kinks. And I would love if ProSAB was open to trying that in July. And John, perhaps you could be our test person to see if it works out having you virtual.
And I could call in. I mean, it doesn't have to be virtual via Zoom or WebEx. It could also be just a phone.
Yeah, I think we'd like to try to do WebEx. We are looking into ordering cameras so that each person can be seen in a similar format to here. So you would see each person at the table. So we really would actually need someone remote to let us know if it works or not. The gamble you take, John, is that if it doesn't work, then we could just call you in. That's absolutely fine. But it would, if you're open to it, I would really love to take that July meeting to try this out.
Oh yeah. Yeah, count me in if the rest of the board wants to do that.
Count you in for being out.
Well, yeah,
it'll be virtual.
It's also a question of being able to record everyone properly and have the meetings recorded. So I think if we could do it all through WebEx, that would be great. And if everyone could be recorded through that method, it would make sense.
Yeah, I mean, I would say you would be our first, and so it may not go smoothly, and so bear with us, but we have to try somewhere. And if you're open, it would be great to work with ProSab to figure out how to make this happen.
And Miranda, I could also work with you, like stepping up to that, right? So before the meeting, we've actually tested it a few times.
Yep, that'd be great.
Yeah, I'm definitely open to it too. I'm not sure about having I know I've got some discussions about having some pre-meetings with the Ned Rink and tennis people. I'm just not sure I can make it by 6 p.m. in person.
So that meeting with Ned Rink won't be until August.
Yeah.
After all the emails. And so we will have had more time to sort that out. Now they're very interested in meeting in person. And so I think the hope is that if we can start to move towards that,
it's going to leave me with such a short window in between work and getting there. It's really going to be tough.
Alternatively, when we go to plan the August agenda, if you're open to taking that first hour of your regular meeting for that conversation, then it could also occur at 7.
Okay. And then it would be posted, which they are also interested in having as many ProSab representatives in that meeting. They would like all of ProSab to be there. So
I think it's worth fleshing that out a little bit more because obviously, there's some debate about the facilitator. And I think when you involve that many people, and given kind of the nature of some of these emails, it might make sense to have a facilitator there to guide that discussion. But I think more to come, let's get a better idea of really what their intentions are. You know, my only goal was to organize people coming together, and it became far more complicated than I had hoped.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I'm very curious as to what exactly they're intending, because just from the way that the emails unfolded, it sounded like we were going to be ambushed, and I don't really want to be ambushed.
Yeah, I was told that it was a continuation of our previous conversation about how we could collaborate and work together. And the vibe I'm getting from the email similarly is that there is a really contentious relationship between them, and we're supposed to come in and somehow help with that. And people are not necessarily being forthcoming with what's going on between the two organizations.
I would like to maybe let them know too that there is no potential for grant funding through GoCo until at least 2022, and even then, like their whole format is changing. They haven't even released like what their requirements are going to be. So we have very little information or guarantees that we can give them, you know, any kind of grant support writing.
Yep. Yes, I think I'm glad that got pushed out to August, because I do think there's a little bit more information we can try to gather before we even have a meeting.
Yes.
Absolutely. I would love to have a couple of offline conversations about what exactly it is that is going on between them, and whether or not coming to ProSab and airing grievances is necessarily the right way to start the process of whatever it is they're trying to start.
Yeah, agreed. So for July, can we, I mean, I don't know, Jesse, if you want to go around and ask everyone how they're feeling about being in person and John being our virtual member?
Yeah, sure.
Before we do that, I just want to make sure it's very clear that I don't think anyone should feel pressured to agree to meet in person, and that if you prefer to stay virtual, I think that it's totally fine if we stay virtual. I just want to make sure that that's very clear, that we don't have to all agree to meet in person. There's no rush for this.
And I think double to that is John doesn't have to be our only virtual person. We could test it. You know, again, my only fear is if something goes wrong, we don't have everyone. But I agree. You know, I think everyone's in a place where we're navigating what comfort. And if you're also not comfortable sharing verbally how you feel, that is something you could just, pass on or say that you want to think about it more. I think that's completely fine.
Okay. All right, Chris, how do you feel about July?
Sorry.
No worries.
Let's go back to meeting in the multipurpose room to set it up that we're far enough apart from each other. We're mic'd. and we're respectful of one another, because I think meetings would go a lot quicker if we're seeing what everybody's doing.
Dang.
Brian?
I'm good, as long as Chris doesn't get to watch me do crossword puzzles during the meeting.
Oh.
Atashna?
Yeah, I'm
Don't
fine
help
with
me
it.
with crossword puzzles during a meeting.
Could we possibly do it earlier? You said something about Jesse, 6 would be too early for you?
Yeah, it's just not going to happen for me.
Okay. Okay.
I'm out in the woods with 14 screaming children for 8
Jeez.
hours.
Oh my God.
Great. John, you're going to be that remote tester?
Right. And we'll test it out ahead of time so we know that we won't have any foul ups, hopefully.
All right.
That's
Eric?
great.
Yeah, as long as I can still noodle.
Very good.
Yes.
Does that mean I can change my vote if Eric's can do that? No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, we're all out. Great. Yeah, no, I'm going to probably try and catch a ride off someone because I'm not into driving in the dark too. But I have a neighbor in Big Springs now, so on the ProSat board, I'll probably request a ride. All right, sounds good to me too. Let's do it. Is there any
Awesome,
further
thank you.
business? Any further business?
Motion to adjourn.
9:20. Anyone going to second that?
I'll second it.
All right. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thanks,
See you.
Jess.
Thanks,
Good night.
everybody.
Thank
See you
you.
in person in a month.
Brenda, don't get fried in Vegas.
Yeah, thanks. It's really hot in Vegas where I am right now, everyone.
It's
Oh,
really hot here too.
It's 120 degrees. So
Oh my
it's
God.
melting over here.
Stay safe.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.